The reconnaissance ship tore through the atmosphere of Eldergrove like a falling star, trailing smoke and fire behind it as Maya Foster gripped her seat with white knuckles and prayed to whatever gods might be listening that they would survive. The next 60 seconds, the hull screamed as it scraped against tree branches the size of buildings, and then everything went dark. When Maya opened her eyes, she was lying in soft moss that glowed faintly blue in the dim light filtering through the massive forest canopy above her, and her head throbbed with a pain that made her want to close her eyes again and never open them, but she was a soldier, and soldiers did not have the luxury of giving up. She pulled herself to her feet and looked around at the wreckage of their ship, scattered across a clearing filled with flowers that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and the air smelled of honey. And something else, something ancient and wild. 3 of her crew were still alive, groaning as they climbed from the debris, but 2 seats were empty, and Maya felt that familiar weight settle on her chest. The weight of being the one who survived when others did not. They had been running from Lord Varric and his shadow fleet for 3 days, jumping from system to system with failing engines and dwindling supplies, and now they were stranded on an elven moon, with no way to call for help, because their communications array was scattered across half a mile of alien forest. Maya was checking the wounds of Private Kate Morgan when she heard it. A low rumble that made the ground beneath her feet vibrate and sent small stones skittering across the moss. She turned slowly, reaching for her sidearm, and froze. The dragon was perhaps 30 feet long from nose to tail, with scales that gleamed like rubies in the filtered sunlight and eyes that burned with an intelligence that was almost frightening in its intensity, and sitting on its back was the most beautiful woman Maya had ever seen. The elf had silver hair that fell to her waist and skin that seemed to glow with a pale light, and she wore armor made of some material that looked like woven starlight. But it was her eyes that made Maya catch her breath. They were violet, deep and endless as the void between stars, but they did not focus on anything, and they did not track movement when Maya raised her hand. The woman was blind. The dragon lowered its massive head and sniffed at Maya with nostrils that could have swallowed her whole, and then it made a sound that was almost like a purr. The blind woman smiled and slid from the dragon's back with a grace that spoke of years of practice. Landing lightly on the moss without hesitation or fear, she walked toward Maya with confident steps, never stumbling over the rocks or debris, and Maya realized that somehow this woman could sense where everything was without seeing it. When she was close enough to touch, the blind woman stopped and tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Maya's chest. Right over her heart, Maya felt warmth spread through her body from that point of contact, and the woman's smile grew wider. Her voice was like music when she spoke, soft and clear in the common tongue that served as a bridge between species. She said that her name was Seraphine Moonwhisper, and that she was a princess of the Silver Moon Kingdom, and that the dragon was called Crimson, and that they meant no harm to the human survivors. She said that she could feel Maya's heart and that it was good and strong despite carrying so much pain and grief. Maya did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing and just stood there while this strange blind princess touched her face with gentle fingers, tracing the scars that ran from her temple to her jaw. Seraphine said that she could not see the scars, but that she could feel the story behind them. The story of someone who had fought hard to protect others and who blamed herself for those she could not save. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, and she pulled away, turning her back because she did not want this stranger to see her cry. But Seraphine just laughed softly and said that she did not need eyes to know when someone was hurting. Before Maya could respond, the forest erupted with movement as dozens of elven soldiers materialized from the shadows between trees, their weapons trained on the human survivors, and behind them came more humans. Soldiers from the Starlight Venture led by Commander Lydia Hart. Maya's older sister Lydia's face was hard as she surveyed the scene, taking in the crashed ship and the elven forces, and her sister standing next to an alien princess and a dragon. The elven commander, a tall woman with dark hair and golden armor, stepped forward and introduced herself as General Kira Moonshadow. She said that they had been tracking Varric's forces and had seen the human ship crash, and that they had come to investigate. But now that they were here, she said, perhaps fate had brought them together for a reason. Varric was growing stronger every day, she explained, corrupting elven nobles and conquering territory with his shadow fleet and dark magic. The Silver Moon Kingdom needed allies, and the humans needed sanctuary, and there was a way to seal an alliance between their peoples, a way that had been used for thousands of years. A royal marriage. Lydia's expression did not change, but Maya saw her sister's hand tighten on her weapon. General Kira continued, saying that Princess Seraphine had been considered unmarriageable by the other noble houses because of her blindness, that they saw her as weak and flawed despite her many gifts. But if a human were to marry her, it would send a message that the Silver Moon Kingdom valued strength of character over physical perfection, and it would bind humanity to the elven cause, giving the human fleet a home and protection in exchange for military support against Varric. Maya felt her stomach drop as she realized what was being suggested, and she opened her mouth to protest, but Lydia spoke first, her voice cold and practical as always. She said that Lieutenant Commander Maya Foster would be honored to marry Princess Seraphine, that it would be a privilege to unite their peoples through such a bond. Maya stared at her sister in shock and betrayal, unable to believe that Lydia would volunteer her for this without even asking. But before she could say anything, Seraphine stepped forward and raised her hand for silence. She turned to face Maya even though she could not see her, and her violet eyes seemed to look right into Maya's soul. She said that she understood Maya's anger and fear, that she knew what it was like to be used as a political tool by people who claimed to care about her. But she promised that if Maya agreed to this marriage, it would not be just a transaction. She said that she had touched Maya's heart and felt her courage and her loyalty and her pain, and that she wanted to know this human better. She said that she could not see Maya's face or her scars, but that she could feel what truly mattered. She could feel Maya's heart. And if Maya gave her a chance, Seraphine promised that they would be equals and partners, not just pawns in someone else's game. Maya looked into those blind violet eyes and saw honesty there, saw a kind of strength that had nothing to do with sight or physical power. She thought about her crew, about the thousands of humans on the fleet who needed a home and protection. She thought about Varric and his shadow forces and the people who would die if he was not stopped. And she thought about the way Seraphine had touched her face and known her story without words. Maya took a deep breath and nodded slowly. She said yes. Seraphine smiled and reached for Maya's hand. Threading their fingers together, Crimson made that purring sound again and nuzzled against them both, and Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. Maybe this would not be so terrible after all, but then Seraphine's expression changed, becoming serious and troubled. She said that there was something Maya needed to know before they proceeded, something that made this alliance even more urgent than it seemed. Varric was not just a warlord seeking power. He was searching for an ancient weapon left behind by a long-dead race, a weapon that could reshape reality itself. And he believed that only someone with sight beyond sight could activate it. Someone like Seraphine. He would stop at nothing to capture her, to use her unique perception to unlock power that should never be touched. And if he succeeded, both their peoples would fall into darkness. Maya felt ice settle in her stomach as she realized that marrying Seraphine meant more than politics. It meant putting herself between this blind princess and a madman who would burn worlds to get what he wanted. She looked at her sister and saw the same grim understanding. In Lydia's eyes, they were not just forming an alliance, they were going to war, and Maya had just become the shield for the one person Varric wanted most. The Silver Moon Palace rose from the forest like a dream made of crystal and living wood, its towers reaching toward the twin moons that hung in the purple sky, and Maya felt completely out of place as elven servants led her through halls where everything seemed to glow with soft light. She had been given quarters in the royal wing, rooms larger than the entire ship she had crashed just 2 days ago, but the luxury only made her feel more like a prisoner. The elven courtiers whispered behind their hands when she passed, their musical voices carrying words she was not meant to hear but could understand anyway. They called her the scarred savage, the crude human who had somehow tricked their princess into accepting a marriage proposal. They said that Seraphine was too kind for her own good, too naive to understand that humans could not be trusted. Maya tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the mission and the alliance and all the good reasons this marriage made sense. But at night, alone in her too large bed, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake on the third morning. Seraphine came to her rooms unannounced, with Crimson padding behind her like an enormous cat. The princess wore simple training clothes instead of her formal robes, and she carried 2 wooden practice swords. She said that they were going to train together. that she wanted to see how Maya fought. Maya pointed out the obvious flaw in that plan, that Seraphine could not actually see anything. But the princess just laughed and said that sight was overrated. They went to the training grounds where elven warriors practiced with weapons that seemed to dance in their hands, and every eye turned to watch as the blind princess and the human soldier faced each other. Maya felt self-conscious and angry, like this was all some elaborate joke at her expense. But then Seraphine attacked. The princess moved like water flowing around stones, her practice sword whistling through the air with precision that should have been impossible for someone without sight. Maya barely managed to block the first strike, and the second caught her on the shoulder hard enough to make her grunt. She stopped holding back after that. They fought for 20 minutes while the elven warriors watched in silence, and Maya discovered that fighting Seraphine was unlike anything she had experienced before. The princess seemed to know where Maya would strike before Maya herself knew, moving to block or counter with fluid grace. When Maya tried to fake her out with a feint, Seraphine did not fall for it because she was not watching Maya's blade. She was reading Maya's intentions, feeling the shift in her stance and the tension in her muscles. Maya had never felt so thoroughly outmatched by someone who could not even see her. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard and covered in sweat, Seraphine smiled and said that Maya was good but predictable. She said that Maya relied too much on her eyes and not enough on her other senses. She said that she would teach Maya to fight the way she did, to feel the battle instead of just seeing it. And in return, Maya could teach her about human tactics and technology over the following weeks. They trained together every morning while Crimson watched and sometimes offered telepathic commentary that made them both laugh. Maya learned to close her eyes and listen for the whisper of movement, to feel the displacement of air when a blade passed close. She learned to trust her instincts instead of second-guessing every decision. And slowly, grudgingly, she began to respect Seraphine not just as a political ally but as a warrior in her own right. In the evenings, they would sit in the palace gardens while Crimson curled around them like a warm wall of scales, and they would talk about things that had nothing to do with war or politics. Seraphine told Maya about growing up blind in a culture that valued physical perfection, about the loneliness of being different and the frustration of being underestimated. She told Maya about the day she bonded with Crimson, how the dragon had chosen her despite the protests of the royal council, and how that bond had given her confidence she had never known before. Maya found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Not even Lydia. She told Seraphine about the battle where she lost half her squad, about the guilt that kept her awake at night. She told her about feeling like she was never good enough, never strong enough to save everyone, and Seraphine listened without judgment, her blind eyes somehow seeing more than anyone else ever. Had she said that Maya could not save everyone, and that trying to do so would only destroy her? She said that strength was not about winning every fight or preventing every death. It was about getting back up after you fell and continuing to fight for what mattered. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, some old weight beginning to lift. She realized that she was starting to care about Seraphine, not just as a political necessity but as a person, maybe even as something more. But she did not say that out loud because she was not ready to examine those feelings too closely. Crimson seemed to know anyway, the dragon's ancient eyes gleaming with amusement. Whenever Maya blushed at something Seraphine said. The bonding ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon, just 3 weeks away, and preparations consumed the palace. But beneath the festivities, tension grew. Reports came in daily of Varric's forces moving closer, conquering border territories and corrupting elven nobles with promises of power. General Kira and Commander Lydia met constantly to plan defensive strategies, and Maya found herself pulled into those meetings as Seraphine's future partner. She saw the maps marked with red where Varric controlled territory, saw how the Shadow Fleet was slowly surrounding the Silver Moon Kingdom, and she understood that this wedding was not just about alliance. It was a race against time. On the night of the diplomatic feast, 3 weeks before the ceremony, Maya wore formal clothes that felt like a costume and tried not to fidget. She sat beside Seraphine at the high table, while elven nobles and human officers mingled below, eating food that tasted like starlight, and drinking wine that made colors seem brighter. Seraphine wore a gown of silver and blue that made her look like moonlight given form, and Maya could not stop glancing at her. The princess caught her hand under the table and squeezed, and Maya felt warmth spread through her. Everything was going well until the lights went out. The hall plunged. Into darkness and chaos erupted as elven warriors drew. Weapons and human soldiers activated. Their energy shields. Maya pulled Seraphine close and drew her sidearm, scanning the darkness for threats. She saw movement near the high table, a figure in black armor moving with inhuman speed toward them. She fired twice and the figure stumbled but kept coming. Then Crimson was there, materializing from the shadows with a roar that shook the walls. The dragon breathed fire that lit up the hall like day, revealing a dozen assassins in black armor scattered throughout the crowd. Maya and Seraphine moved as one, their weeks of training showing as they fought back-to-back. Maya provided ranged support with her weapon, while Seraphine wielded a blade that had appeared in her hand from somewhere. Her movements precise and deadly. Together they were formidable, and the assassins fell one by one. But during the chaos, Maya saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the attackers was not wearing black armor. He wore the robes of a royal advisor, someone trusted and respected, a traitor within the palace walls. The battle ended quickly once Crimson and the royal guard joined the fight. But 5 elven nobles and 2 human officers lay dead, and the captured assassins refused to speak. Their eyes blank with the same corruption Maya had seen in Varric's forces. But the traitor advisor broke under interrogation, spilling everything in a desperate attempt to save himself. He told them that Varric wanted Seraphine alive, that he believed her unique perception was the key to unlocking an ancient weapon hidden in the obsidian wastes. He told them that Varric was no longer entirely sane, that something had corrupted him during his exile, something dark and hungry, and he told them that more traitors existed within the palace, sleeper agents waiting for the right moment to strike. The royal council convened immediately, and the debate raged for hours. Some nobles wanted to hide Seraphine away, to lock her in the deepest vault and protect her with armies. But Seraphine refused. She stood before the council with her blind eyes blazing and her voice steady, and she said that hiding would not stop Varric. He would tear the kingdom apart looking for her, would kill everyone who stood in his way. The only solution was to go on the offensive. They would travel to the obsidian wastes themselves and find this ancient weapon first, and they would destroy it before Varric could use it to hurt anyone. The council erupted in protest, but Maya stood beside Seraphine and backed her play. She said that humanity would provide support, that Commander Lydia would commit ships and soldiers to protect the expedition. She said that they were done running and hiding. It was time to take the fight to Varric. Lydia looked at her sister for a long moment, and Maya saw something like pride in her eyes. Before she nodded, the alliance was no longer just words and ceremonies. It was action, and trust, and a willingness to risk everything for each other. As they left the council chamber, Seraphine took Maya's hand and pulled her into a quiet alcove. She said that she was afraid, but that having Maya beside her made her brave. She said that she knew this marriage had started as politics, but that somewhere along the way it had become real, at least for her. Maya's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what Seraphine was saying, and she realized that it had become real for her too. The transport ships left at dawn, cutting through the purple sky with engines that hummed like angry bees, and Maya watched the palace shrink behind them until it was just a glittering speck against the green forest. They were a mixed force of 20 soldiers, half human and half elven, along with Seraphine and Crimson, and enough equipment to survive 2 weeks in the most hostile territory their peoples had ever mapped. Commander Lydia had wanted to send more, but General Kira had insisted that a smaller force would move faster and attract less attention. Maya thought they were both being optimistic about their chances, but she kept that to herself. The obsidian wastes earned their name from the black crystal formations that covered the landscape like frozen waves, reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at. The region was unstable, Seraphine had explained, because the ancient race that built there had experimented with technologies that warped space and time. Their ships landed at the edge of the waste, where crystal met normal rock, and Maya felt her stomach twist as she helped Seraphine out of the transport. The air here tasted wrong, metallic and cold, and the gravity seemed to shift with every step. One moment she felt light as air, and the next she weighed twice as much. And keeping her balance required constant attention. Seraphine handled it better, her unique senses allowing her to anticipate the gravity shifts before they happened. She moved through the crystal formations with confidence, while the soldiers around her stumbled and cursed. Private Kate Morgan, who had survived the crash with Maya, walked beside an elven ranger named Nessa Starwind. The two had become friends during training, bonding over shared experiences of loss and duty. Kate's husband had died during the evacuation of Earth, and Nessa's brother had fallen to Varric's forces. They understood each other's pain in a way that transcended species. Maya watched them talk, quietly as they hiked through the crystals, and felt hope that maybe this alliance could last. Beyond the current crisis, maybe humans and elves could truly become partners instead of just temporary allies. The first day passed without incident, though the landscape grew more bizarre with every mile. They saw crystal formations that existed in multiple places at once, their shapes shifting depending on the angle of viewing. They passed through zones where time seemed to slow or speed up, where seconds stretched into minutes or hours compressed into moments, and they felt watched. Those sensors showed no life signs anywhere nearby on the second night. While they camped in a relatively stable zone, Crimson became agitated. The dragon paced in circles and made low growling sounds that set everyone's nerves on edge. Seraphine communed with him telepathically for several minutes before turning to the group with worry etched on her face. She said that Crimson could sense Varric's forces moving through the wastes, approaching from multiple directions. They were being herded towards something. Though what remained unclear, Maya and the elven captain, a stern woman named Vera Windwalker, studied their maps and tried to plot a new course. But every alternative route led through even more unstable terrain or dead-ended at impassable crystal walls. They were committed now. Forward was the only option. On the third day they found the temple. It rose from the black crystal like a mountain carved by mad gods, all impossible angles and surfaces that seemed to exist in dimensions beyond the normal three. Holographic symbols flickered across its surface in languages no one recognized, and the air around it vibrated with barely contained energy. Maya felt her skin prickle as they approached the entrance, a doorway that opened onto darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light. Seraphine reached out and touched the temple wall, and suddenly the symbols rearranged themselves into common script. She read them aloud, her voice echoing strangely in the crystal landscape. The inscriptions told of the precursors, a race so advanced they had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. But their knowledge had attracted attention from entities beyond normal space, beings from the void between dimensions that hungered for the light of living minds. The precursors had created weapons to fight these void entities, tools of immense power that could rewrite the laws of physics. But the weapons were too dangerous to use freely, so they had locked them behind safeguards that required unique forms of perception to unlock sight. Beyond sight, Seraphine stood silent for a long moment after reading, her expression troubled. She said that the precursors had known their weapons would be needed again someday, that the void entities would return, and they had built these temples as tests, as ways to ensure that only those with the right kind of awareness could access the weapons. She said that she could feel something inside the temple calling to her, something that resonated with her unique perception. It both terrified and excited her. Maya wanted to tell her not to go inside, to turn back while they still could, but she knew Seraphine well enough now to understand that the princess would not run from this, so instead Maya squeezed her hand and said they would face whatever was inside together. The temple interior was vast beyond what the external dimension suggested, its walls covered in more holographic displays that showed star systems and mathematical equations and diagrams of devices that hurt to look at. They walked through chambers filled with crystalline machinery that still hummed with power after uncounted millennia, and they saw weapons that could unmake matter with a thought, and everywhere they saw warnings about the perception engine. The most powerful and dangerous tool the precursors had created, it could reshape reality based on the wielder's will. But the price was consumption of the user's life force. It was a weapon of last resort, meant to be used only when extinction was the alternative. In the central chamber, they found a holographic recording left by the precursor's final council. The projection showed beings of light and energy, clearly not limited to physical forms, and their voices carried weight that pressed against Maya's mind. They spoke of their failure to contain the void entities, of the war that had cost them everything. They spoke of sealing the perception engine in a vault deep beneath the wastes, behind locks that required perfect understanding of both physical and spiritual reality to open. And they spoke of hope that someday, someone would come who possessed that dual perception, someone who could use the engine to finally end the threat from the void. The recording ended with coordinates for the vault location, burned into Maya's vision like afterimages. They had what they came for. But as they turned to leave the temple, alarms blared and the crystal walls began to glow red. The automated defense systems had activated, detecting hostile intent from someone nearby. And then they heard the explosions outside. Varric had arrived. Maya and the soldiers rushed to the entrance to find chaos. Varric's corrupted forces had surrounded the temple. Hundreds of soldiers and war beasts twisted by void energy into monstrosities that barely resembled their original forms, and standing at the center of them was Varric himself. He had changed since the last intelligence reports. His skin was covered in black veins that pulsed with dark light, and his eyes were empty voids that seemed to pull at Maya's sanity. He was no longer fully elven or fully anything recognizable. The void had claimed him. He called out to Seraphine in a voice that echoed strangely, layered with other voices from far away. He said that he had been promised power beyond imagination if he brought the blind seer to the vault. He said that the void entities would remake reality into something perfect and pure, without weakness or suffering. Said that Seraphine should come willingly because resistance was pointless and death was inevitable. Seraphine's response was to draw her blade and take a fighting stance. She said that she would never help him destroy everything, that she would die first. Varric laughed and signaled his forces to attack. The battle was chaos from the first moment. Maya's soldiers fought desperately against overwhelming numbers, their weapons barely slowing the corrupted creatures. The elven rangers used magic and steel in combination, creating zones of light that burned the void-touched flesh, and Crimson was magnificent and terrible, breathing fire that turned enemies to ash and using claws that could tear through armor like paper. But there were too many. Maya fought beside Seraphine, their training paying off as they moved in perfect sync. But she could see they were losing ground, being slowly pushed back toward the temple entrance. Captain Vera fell with a cry, her leg torn by a beast's claws. Private Kate and Nessa fought back to back, protecting each other with desperate efficiency. And still more enemies came. Maya made a decision in a heartbeat. She grabbed Seraphine and shouted for half the soldiers to retreat, to make for the transport ships and get away while they could. She would buy them time with the rest of the squad. Seraphine tried to argue, but Maya kissed her hard and fast. She said that she would not watch Seraphine die, not today, not ever. She said that Seraphine needed to reach the vault and destroy the engine before Varric could use it, and then she pushed Seraphine toward Crimson and screamed for them to go. The dragon hesitated, its ancient eyes meeting Maya's with understanding and sorrow. Then it grabbed Seraphine gently in its claws and took flight, several elven rangers following on their own mounts. Seraphine's scream of protest was drowned by explosions as Maya turned back to the battle. Maya woke in a medical tent that smelled of antiseptic and blood. Her chest wrapped so tight she could barely breathe. Commander Lydia sat beside her cot with dark circles under her eyes and a tactical display showing the positions of their scattered forces. She said that Maya had been unconscious for 6 hours, that the medics had done what they could, but 3 ribs were broken and her lung was bruised. She said that Maya needed to rest and heal and let others handle the mission. Now Maya tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain exploded through her torso. But she pushed through it because resting was not an option. Not while Seraphine was out there facing Varric. She told Lydia that she was going back, that Seraphine needed her. Lydia tried to argue, but Maya could see in her sister's eyes that she had already lost, because Lydia understood what it meant to care about someone enough to throw yourself into danger for them. She helped Maya stand and called for armor and weapons and pain, medication strong enough to let her function within the hour. Maya was on a transport heading back to the vault coordinates with every soldier they could spare. She tried not to think about the fact that she might already be too late at the vault entrance. Seraphine stood before the massive door with her hands pressed against symbols that glowed beneath her touch. She could feel the lock mechanisms responding to her unique perception, could sense the complex patterns of energy that needed to be aligned just right behind her. Crimson and 4 elven rangers held a defensive position at the canyon entrance. They could hear Varric's forces approaching, could see the black clouds of corruption rolling toward them like a living thing. Seraphine worked faster, her fingers dancing across the door as she solved puzzles that would have been impossible for anyone with normal sight. The precursors had designed this lock specifically for someone like her, someone who could perceive the connections between things rather than just their physical forms. And finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the door opened. The vault beyond was a chamber of crystalline processors and holographic displays, and at its center sat a throne that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The perception engine Seraphine could feel its power radiating outward, could sense the way it touched reality and found it malleable. This was a tool that could reshape existence itself, based on the will of its user, and it was also hungry. She could feel it reaching toward her consciousness, trying to connect with her unique perception. It wanted to be used, wanted to fulfill the purpose for which it was created. But she also felt the darkness beneath its surface, the price that would be paid for wielding such power behind her. Explosions echoed through the canyon as Varric's forces engaged the Elven Rangers. Crimson roared defiance and breathed fire that held back the tide for precious seconds, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Seraphine knew she did not have much time. She approached the throne slowly, reaching out to touch its surface the moment her fingers made contact. Visions flooded her mind. She saw the precursors in their final days, using the engine to fight void entities that poured through tears in reality. She saw whole star systems rewritten to trap the invaders, saw dimensions collapsed and reformed, and she saw the cost, saw the precursors consumed one by one as they channeled the engine's power. They had known they were dying and had chosen to anyway. Because the alternative was extinction for all life, the visions faded and Seraphine stood trembling before the throne. She understood now what was required. The engine could only be activated by someone with sight beyond sight, but using it would consume the user completely. There would be no survival. No happy ending, just sacrifice. She thought about Maya, about the kiss they had shared before being separated. She thought about the future they might have had together if circumstances were different. And she thought about all the lives that would be lost if Varric got his hands on this power. The choice was not really a choice at all. She was about to sit on the throne. When the vault entrance exploded, Varric strode through, the smoke and rubble, his corrupted form barely recognizable as Elven. Any more black tendrils writhed beneath his skin, and his void-filled eyes fixed on Seraphine with terrifying intensity. He said that she had saved him the trouble of opening the door, that now he could take what was rightfully his. He said that the void entities had promised him immortality and power beyond measure if he delivered the engine. He said that he would reshape reality into a perfect order where weakness and suffering did not exist. Seraphine drew her blade and positioned herself between Varric and the throne. She said that she would die before letting him touch it. Varric laughed, a sound that hurt to hear, and attacked. The battle was brief and brutal. Seraphine fought with everything she had learned, using her unique perception to anticipate his moves. But Varric was enhanced by void energy. His strength and speed beyond anything natural. Caught her blade mid-strike and broke it with his bare hand. Then he grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. She could feel his corrupted touch burning her skin, could sense the void entities watching through his eyes. He said that she was special but not special enough to stand against him. He said that he would force her to activate the engine and then kill her, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. Crimson burst into the vault with a roar that shook the walls. Having fought through Varric's forces at devastating cost, the dragon attacked with fury, claws and fire and telepathic assaults that made Varric stagger. But even Crimson was not enough. Varric released Seraphine and turned on the dragon, his corrupted magic meeting Crimson's fire in explosions that cracked the vault walls. They fought with the intensity of natural disasters, and Seraphine could only watch helplessly as the dragon she loved was slowly overwhelmed. Then she felt it, a familiar presence approaching fast, a heart she knew as well as her own Maya. The human burst into the vault at the head of a strike team, her armor cracked and her movements stiff with pain, but her eyes blazed with determination and her weapon never wavered. She saw Seraphine on the ground and Varric attacking Crimson, and she understood the situation instantly. She opened fire on Varric while screaming for her soldiers to support the dragon. The vault became chaos as humans and the few remaining Elven Rangers engaged Varric's corrupted forces, and in the midst of battle, Maya fought her way to Seraphine's side. She helped the princess to her feet, and they stood together before the throne. Maya said that she had come back because She could not let Seraphine face this alone. Seraphine felt tears on her face as she explained the terrible truth: the engine required sight beyond sight to activate, but using it would consume the user's life force completely. There was no way to survive, no way to win without sacrifice, and she had been preparing to make that sacrifice when Varric arrived. Maya listened and then looked at the throne with calculating eyes. She said that the engine required sight beyond sight, but it did not specify whose sight. She said that if they combined their perceptions, Maya's tactical vision and Seraphine's emotional awareness, they might be able to share the burden. They might both survive, Seraphine wanted to argue, but before she could, Crimson sent a desperate telepathic message. The dragon had seen deeper visions when fighting Varric, had glimpsed the truth about the void entities. They were not just attacking. They were already here. Varric's corruption was a doorway, and more void entities were pushing through him every moment. If they did not seal the rifts now, reality itself would begin to collapse. They were out of time. Maya and Seraphine looked at each other and came to the same decision simultaneously. They would try to use the engine together. If they died, at least it would be side by side. They approached the throne hand in hand while behind them the battle raged. Varric noticed what they were doing and broke away from his fight with Crimson. He charged toward them with inhuman speed, void tendrils reaching out to tear them apart. Maya's soldiers threw themselves in his path, buying precious seconds with their lives. Captain Vera took a blow meant for Maya, and Fell Commander Lydia appeared in the vault entrance with reinforcements and opened fire on Varric, and, in that moment of distraction, Maya and Seraphine sat on the throne together. The engine-activated power beyond comprehension flooded through them, connecting their minds in ways that made their previous telepathic bond seem like a whisper. Maya experienced the world through Seraphine's perception, felt emotions as tangible things, and sensed the connections between all living beings. Seraphine experienced Maya's tactical awareness, saw space and time as manipulatable dimensions, and understood cause and effect with crystal clarity. Together they achieved something neither could alone: perfect understanding of both material and immaterial reality, and they felt the engine responding, felt its power becoming theirs to command. But they also felt it consuming them, burning through their life force like fuel. They had minutes at most before they would be gone. Seraphine reached out through the engine and found the void rifts scattered across reality. She felt the entities pushing through, felt their hunger for the light of living consciousness. And Maya provided the tactical framework, calculated exactly how to seal each rift without causing cascade failures in spacetime. Together, they commanded the engine to act. Reality itself seemed to shudder across the galaxy. Void rifts began to close. Varric screamed as the corruption was pulled out of him, and his corrupted soldiers fell as the void energy abandoned. The medical ships arrived within hours and transformed the Crystal Canyon into a field hospital, where doctors from both species worked side by side to save the wounded. Maya and Seraphine refused treatment at first, insisting on helping others despite their exhaustion. But Commander Lydia eventually ordered Maya to stand down, and General Kira did the same for Seraphine. They were too important to risk, Lydia said with unusual gentleness in her voice. They sat together in a quiet corner while medics checked them over, and Crimson curled protectively around them. The dragon was injured but alive, scales scorched and one wing torn, but the ancient intelligence in those ruby eyes burned bright with satisfaction. They had won. Varric was unconscious in medical custody, the void corruption purged from his body. He would face justice for his crimes, but he would do so as himself rather than as a puppet of entities from beyond reality. His surviving soldiers had surrendered once the corruption left them, many weeping with shame and horror at what they had done. They claimed they could not remember most of it, that the void had controlled their actions. Whether that was true or just a convenient excuse, Maya did not know and was too tired to care. Captain Vera had survived her injuries and was already organizing the combined forces for the journey home. Private Kate and Nessa had died together defending the retreat, and Maya felt that familiar weight of survivor's guilt settle on her chest. But this time, Seraphine was there through their telepathic link, sharing the burden and reminding her that their sacrifice had meaning, that everyone who fell had bought time for others to live. It helped more than Maya would have expected over the following days. As their forces regrouped and began the journey back to the Silver Moon Kingdom, Maya and Seraphine had time to explore their new connection. They could feel each other's emotions constantly now. A background hum of presence that was sometimes overwhelming but mostly comforting, and they discovered that their combat coordination had become almost supernatural. They could anticipate each other's movements perfectly, could share tactical awareness instantly. They would be formidable partners in any future conflicts. But Maya found herself hoping there would be no more conflicts. At least for a while, she was tired of war and death and sacrifice. She wanted time to just be with Seraphine, to explore what they had become together. When they finally returned to the palace, they were greeted as heroes. The streets were lined with crowds waving banners in both human and elven languages. Children threw flowers, and adults cheered themselves hoarse. Maya felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Seraphine squeezed her hand through their link and reminded her that these people needed heroes right now. They needed to believe that the darkness could be defeated. The Royal Council formally dissolved Varek's conquests and began the process of rebuilding, and Commander Lydia and General Kira announced a permanent military alliance between humanity and the Silver Moon Kingdom. The human fleet would be given territory in the outer moons to establish colonies in return. Humans would provide technological expertise and military support. It was everything they had hoped for when this desperate gamble began. But the council also announced something else. The marriage ceremony between Maya and Seraphine would proceed as planned, not because politics required it anymore, but because both parties wished it. Maya and Seraphine stood before the council and confirmed that yes, they wanted to marry, not as a political arrangement but as a genuine union. They had started as strangers thrown together by desperation, but somewhere between training sessions and battles and facing death together, they had fallen in love. The ceremony was held 3 months later under the twin moons of Eldergrove. It was a grand affair that combined human and elven traditions in ways that sometimes clashed, but mostly complemented each other. Maya wore formal military dress with elven ceremonial robes layered over it. Seraphine wore a gown of starlight that made her look like she had stepped out of a dream, and Crimson, fully healed now, served as the ceremonial guardian. The dragon was smaller than before. Maya noticed during the battle with the void entities, something had happened to reset Crimson's growth cycle. The ancient dragon had been reborn into a younger body, retaining all its memories and intelligence but starting its physical development over. It would take decades for Crimson to reach full size again. But none of them minded. They had been given a second chance. All 3 of them. The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt. Maya promised to always see Seraphine for who she truly was. Not for any perceived limitation. Seraphine promised to always feel Maya's heart, to support her through darkness and guide her through doubt. And they both promised to face whatever came next together. As equals and partners, when they kissed to seal their union, the crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard across the palace grounds, and Maya felt complete in a way she never had before. The reception lasted long into the night, with humans and elves mingling freely. Wine and stories flowed, and Maya watched as 2 cultures that had been strangers months ago laughed together like old friends. She saw Commander Lydia talking quietly with General Kira, and something in their body language made Maya suspect her sister might have found her own connection. She saw the soldiers who had fought in the obsidian wastes sharing tales with those who had stayed behind, and she saw children, human and elven both, playing together without any awareness of the differences that had once seemed so important. This was what they had fought for. Maya realized not just survival or military advantage, but the possibility of genuine unity near midnight. Maya and Seraphine slipped away from the celebration to walk in the palace gardens. Crimson followed at a discreet distance, giving them privacy but remaining close enough to protect them. The night air was sweet with the scent of alien flowers, and the twin moons cast everything in silver light. They walked to a balcony that overlooked the human settlement being built in the valley below construction. Lights twinkled like earthbound stars as human engineers worked alongside elven craftsmen to raise buildings that blended both architectural styles. It was beautiful and hopeful, and everything Maya had stopped believing was possible. After Earth fell, Seraphine leaned against her, and Maya wrapped an arm around the princess's waist. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's presence in the peaceful night. Finally, Seraphine spoke softly. She said that she had been terrified when her people first suggested this marriage. She had thought no one could ever see past her blindness, that she would always be defined by what she could not do, and Maya admitted that she had been angry, feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. She had thought the marriage would be a cage, a duty to be endured, but Seraphine had been right from the very beginning. She could not see Maya's face, but she had felt her heart, and that had made all the difference. Maya said that Seraphine had taught her something just as important. That strength came in many forms, and that perceived weakness could be the source of unique gifts. She said that Seraphine was the bravest person she had ever known, and that loving her had changed everything. Seraphine smiled and turned to face Maya fully. She placed her hand over Maya's heart. Just as she had that first day in the forest, she said that she could feel Maya's love now, constant and warm through their telepathic link, and that it was the most beautiful thing she had ever perceived. They kissed under the moonlight while Crimson watched with obvious satisfaction. The young dragon sent a telepathic message that made them both laugh. He said that he had known from the first moment they would be perfect for each other, said that humans and elves both were stubborn and blind in their own ways, but that love had a way of opening eyes and healing hearts. Maya and Seraphine looked at each other and smiled. They had started this journey as strangers from different worlds, brought together by desperation and political necessity. They had fought through battles and betrayals and impossible odds. They had faced darkness that could have consumed reality itself, and they had emerged changed but whole, bound together by something stronger than duty or politics. They had found love in the most unexpected place, love that saw past surfaces and touched souls, love that did not require perfect vision to be perfectly clear. They stood together watching the settlement grow in the valley below. Maya thought about everything they had overcome. She thought about the friends they had lost and the scars they carried. She thought about the future they were building, human and elven united, and she thought about the woman beside her, the blind princess who had learned to see with her heart. Maya realized that Seraphine had been teaching her that same skill all along, to look beyond the surface, to feel connections rather than just observe them, to understand that the most important things in life could not be seen with eyes, only felt with the heart. Seraphine leaned closer and whispered that she loved Maya not because of anything Maya had done or any role she filled, but simply because of who she was. Maya said the words back, meaning them more than she had ever meant anything. And in that moment, with the twin moons shining above and their dragon companion nearby, and the sounds of celebration drifting from the palace, everything was perfect. They had found home not in a place, but in each other, and whatever challenges the future brought, they would face them together. Two hearts beating as one, two souls seeing through love what eyes alone could never perceive.